Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us. And welcome one and all to our very first teissTalk episode of 2024. You no longer have to put up with my Christmas jumper. And instead, we're just going to probably be talking about New Year's resolutions and things like that. We do have a fabulous show for you today, all talking about, one of our favorite topics, internal audit. Don't forget that there is a prize for the best question. The question that makes us think the most, laugh the most, or even just scratch our heads the most will mean that you could be in the running to win a Tice mug. Yes, one of the most coveted items. I've never put a hot drink in mine. It's a bit like taking the packaging off your Star Wars figures. But yes, I believe a number of people out there have got a fine collection of them. If you're looking to add or get your very first one, then please do jump in with questions and put our panelists to task. Talking of which, can I please introduce onto stage Veselin, Daniel, and Deborah? Please come on. Veselin, thank you. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good considering in the area we're working in, right? So you can never say what the day will bring.
Yes, exactly. And Daniel, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Although I am feeling quite cold just looking at you in a t-shirt.
It's all right. I'm not smuggling Tic Tacs yet. And Deborah, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, Tom. Yes, I am all relaxed following Christmas and really, not quite back in the swing of things yet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it takes until about March, let's face it, and then we're rolling down for Easter. So, in fairness, right. So, shall we get cracking? Shall we start on our news item? Well, it's very festive. 5 cybersecurity New Year's resolutions for businesses. Just out of interest, my New Year's resolution this year is to use wishing wells for the power of good for once. I think that's probably the best way to do it. New Year's business resolutions. We've got here a range of things: cybersecurity, health checks, embrace MFA, educate and empower employees, blah blah blah. Folks, is this a valid list, or is this stuff that we really should have been doing all along?
It's a little bit like the 10 steps. Okay, some of the government puts out. Some of them. Okay, some of this is kind of straightforward. Perhaps the MFA stuff. The other stuff is like this is a whole thesis. This is a whole topic. This is a whole campaign program. This isn't just one thing. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd say that's probably too big a list. Go for Bradley? What the cyclist? You need some marginal differences.
Marginal differences, yeah. They make the wheels perfectly rounder than they were before.
The wheels on the bus.
Yeah.
Sorry, for those who have got children.
I mean, I like Daniel's idea of marginal differences, but personally, I'm kind of a big impact person, and so MFA for me, huge impact, and
Table
if done,
stakes.
yeah, but if done right, can have a massive positive benefit for end users as well. So, yeah.
Veselin, which one would you choose out of this?
Yeah, it's hard. So the last time I checked, there were like 54 items in our security safeguards we need to consider for some basic cybersecurity.
Yes.
But looking at this, I think these 5 of them are included, right? And there is more.
I think that's very true, isn't it? People talk about the basics, but the basics are really quite hard to achieve, aren't they, in many cases?
I mean, I think that's actually the one good thing that Cyber Essentials has done, because it has said, okay, look, these are the basics. Forget your risk assessment. If you don't do these things, it's a bit like an MOT. Doesn't say whether your car is good, but it just says at least it's roadworthy.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they put on here, I would say, I don't know whether they're actually meant to be ordinal, but I would have said the first thing on my list these days is actually the incident response plan.
Yes.
Because you learn so much from it. If you start with the health check, oh, I need that and I need that, and you'll never, it'll be like the old Forth Bridge analogy, which I believe never really happened. It would never get finished. But the incident response plan, go for it. You'll get some perspective, and people will start to share. Oh, I hadn't thought of that, and it brings people together as well.
Absolutely. My view on
Problem
the
is,
incident response plan, for instance, is all the time you try and do everything else, there's still something that's going to go wrong. And if you don't know how to handle that thing that's gone wrong, then it's going to derail everything. So get your incident response plan done first, and then you can build on from that.
I do agree
Yeah.
with that, but what I was going to say is that if you do it too early, your danger is that you've woken up all the little demons, and they now know that every time one of these appears, they've got to raise an incident, and suddenly you find yourself inundated
Yeah.
with incidents. So I would say that the first thing you need to do is build a capability to respond. So never mind the plan, never mind your risk assessment, never mind the basics. One person can't do this alone. You need to build a capability and some kind of framework, which includes that response plan.
So I think we're vehemently agreeing with each other from different ends of the stick here. But yes, I think you're right. You're right. You can write the plan and publish it and do all you want, but if as you say, you get inundated, you're screwed anyway, right?
Well, it's how you use the plan, you know. But I mean, you know the rule. I mean, we're 6.5 minutes into the discussions. We haven't had a quote from Sun Tzu, so I shall put that right for compliance sakes. You know, it's the fact that plan will fall apart with one contact with the problem. In his terms, it's the enemy, but it's working through. It's having had those discussions and being able to talk to each other. So it's not so much the plan as the planning, which you really get the benefit from.
Yeah. I think it's a Mike Tyson quote, isn't it, rather than Sun Tzu? Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face.
I don't know. I don't know. That's why I always stand on the podium, well away from the students.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Veselin, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was thinking so many things, and including, you know, this is where internal audit comes in place, right? So even self-assessment that can support internal audit. So yeah, we can design excellent policy and procedures, but at the end of the day, someone needs to test them. You know, we need to put metrics in place to make sure that they are effective. And internal audit is one of these. One of these mechanisms help us evaluate how effective is this security incident process or something else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Alan Jenkins has jumped in the comments, underpinning your point there, Daniel. No plan survives contact with the enemy, and remember that the enemy also has a vote, which I quite like as well. So, you know, everything there, you know. But as you say, Sun Tzu, I think we're done on that front. I think, you know, educate. For instance, the middle one here, educate and empower employees. That's like a 5-year plan in of itself, right? I mean, that's a big deal. Seems to me they're taking some very large subjects here and saying, hey, here's a New Year's resolution for you. Get this fixed.
Well, at least they didn't use the word awareness, which I think is normally tagged onto this. I mean,
Deborah's favourite, training.
Yeah, I mean, what are we going to do about it? I've gone off on a bit on one at the moment, and I think that any education and empowerment or awareness campaign program ought to start with a little bit of honesty and explain to people that actually our systems are a little bit rubbish. And we're asking them to compensate for that fact until we can turn it all off and start and then on again. Yeah,
not far off. Exactly. And Deborah, I mentioned there your dislike of the term training, because I think I was in a webinar or an interview with you, and you mentioned how much you dislike training.
Well, it's boring, right?
We also said you train a dog.
Yeah.
You don't train employees.
Well, you don't. You know, what we're training them for, obedience, assimilation into the Borg. Yeah. You know, we
might get fewer click-throughs, in fairness.
Really? Because what I was going to say is you're not really training people there, are you? That people are never going to be trained to identify at first sight when thinking quick what a phishing email is. What we really want is to influence people's attitudes towards security so that they're not scared of the topic, so that they have good practices at home that they can bring into the workplace, related to that, getting the basics right. So I suppose what we're talking about is a cultural change within the organization. Well, they don't often start bottom up, do they? They start top down.
Yeah.
So that whole educating your employees, training them, making them aware, all of that gubbins, what we're really talking about is changing the culture of the organization so that
Changing
security is
behaviours,
front
yeah.
and center of mind. And that is not a quick and easy task, is it?
No.
But if
No.
you're talking about shove a CBT in front of them and give them a 10-point multiple choice questionnaire at the end of it, yeah, go for it. Probably wouldn't appear on my New Year's resolution list.
No, exactly. Okay, so I think our overall measurement of this article is interesting, but could try harder. I think is probably the summary there. Let's move on to the panel proper, shall we? Can internal audit boost your cybersecurity readiness? Well, I mean, this could be the shortest session we've ever done because yes, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I mean, it's to me this is a no-brainer. I'd love to hear some of your viewpoints here. So, Veselin, let's start with you here. I mean, internal audit, pain in the backside, or actually useful for improving and raising our baseline?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess it depends, right? So just like a knife, you can cut apples, but you can do harm. So if it's too much, it's too much, and you cannot focus on other things. So it could be also pain. That's true. The last time I looked into, a framework with a security base and specifically focused on cybersecurity, I didn't see internal audit one of them. So we did see several assessments and checks, we need to do, maybe like a self-assessment, etc. But internal audit was not one of them. So it seems, the latest thing I see in the, in the industry that they're moving away to some kind of other verifiable checks, whether things are working as we think they're working. But in the end of the day, I don't think we can avoid internal audit. That's often what the regulators require from us. So it's something we need to live in and use it as best as we can.
Yeah, it's a good analogy with the knife, actually, because I think there's good internal audit and there's bad internal audit. There's internal audit that is actually collaborating and working with you to improve, and then there's the internal audit that's just trying to score points. Deborah, have you come across either of those?
Oh, yeah. I've been some of those too.
Yeah, I think, in fairness, I think we all have, at some point in our career, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the question is, can internal audit boost cybersecurity readiness? And I don't think that's a straightforward yes, because I think that depends on what's your definition of cybersecurity readiness. What do you mean by readiness? Are you ready to meet a breach? Well, internal audit aren't going to help you with that, because internal audit, their role is to check that you are meeting the controls that you have defined within your control framework, and that you're doing that effectively and efficiently. That is their role. Their role is not to tell us what those controls should be. They don't understand our topic to that depth. So if you've got a pretty crap framework in the first place, and it's telling you to do the wrong things, then internal audit are going to exacerbate that, and they're going to say you're not doing the wrong things in the wrong way like you've said you would. So I think it goes back to that building capability. Get the right framework in place, and then definitely internal audit are your friends. And I would say where they really boost it are those tricky controls that nobody wants to comply with. Those ones that technology have always got a reason that they haven't got enough resources to implement it. MFA, our friend, might be one of those. It's too expensive, it's too complicated, we'll do it mañana. Internal audit can be great because they can put their finger straight on it.
Or they can help you drive through internal senior resistance, can't they? They can actually say, hey, this is an audit finding. This needs to be resolved. And I recall, I think one of the points where I transitioned from the bad kind of auditor to the better kind of auditor was when I realized that I could help people do the right things that they were trying to do, but nobody was listening to them. And I think that's a key distinction and message for internal audit.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a difference. I think we have to be careful because there's a difference. There's internal audit. I just noticed because it caught my eye in the chat that I wonder if there's some kind of philosophy in that internal audit IA is actually the letter switch round of AI. There's some kind of study to be put into there, but I think it varies from what kind of industry and what kind of area you're working in, because there's the regulated industries with some hard, rigidly defined controls. Then there are the good practices, a term I prefer to best practices, because I think good practices allows more evolution
and context as well, I think.
But there's also the layers. There's the areas beyond which you cannot go. Those things have to be in place. But it's also how these things are implemented in each organization, and this is where the potential for internal audit to really kind of make their mark, because you've got the standards which you have to comply with, whether that's Cyber Essentials or IASME or 27001 or NIST or etc. The question is that if we were all to be rigidly employing all of those particular clauses in our organizations, we would have the danger of trying to operate in some sort of uniform manner. But that's not true, because we're all different organizations. The trick of internal audit is to understand where the implementation of a control then hits the idiosyncrasy of the organization, to get that balance right. And that actually protects us, because that means that A, we're complying with the standard, but also we're not uniform, so that anybody who would want to do bad things to us, and that's obviously assuming that our threats are from the outside, are going to have difficulties, because the last 27001 organization they attacked is not the same as the next one.
No, that's right. And I think your point that you raise a good point, and one that I think oh God, who is it who's doing all this typing? Of course it's Alan Jenkins. The middle point, the challenge is for IA to have a good cyber understanding, so that they actually understand the nuance of the answer, as opposed to just saying Q's and recording A's. And I think that's really important. Part of the point that you're making there, that if they are just a general internal audit function, they're not necessarily going to understand the difference between why you've got TLS 1.2 and not 1.3. They're both perfectly good in essence, but actually we should be striving for, the better standard, etc. Veselin, have you ever come across an internal audit function that are good auditors but bad cybersecurity operators?
I mean, all kind of things, right? So there are plenty of methodologies, and they often became not well understood, and sometimes internal auditors, don't have the resources to do, what they have to do. But I think I had several good points. The last one, I think it was in the direction how to verify that the security control has been implemented as designed, how to validate that it actually works as intended. I mean, is it a pure compliance as the auditor is checking? Is it like have you implemented as we designed? And it's another thing to verify, is it actually working? Is it effectively mitigating the risk that we are looking to mitigate? So I think what I've seen is often just simply not enough time for auditors to go very deep into their findings. If there is a good baseline, that's something that Deborah talked about, that we need to have the framework. Yes, it's true. They're very good frameworks. We need to do the scoping. We need to do the tailoring of the security controls. Then we establish our own baseline. But even then, if it's if the auditor team is not doesn't have the resources, it's not going to do a very good job.
And I think the second point the first point in the bullets of the panel, using internal audit as a second opinion is great if you know that they understand what it is you're doing and they understand the business environment that you're operating in. And very often, of course, that's even more exacerbated when an external auditor comes in and they're just looking at something they're just looking at literally what's in front of them. But and I think again, Alan Jenkins is on fire today. Somebody wants another mug for his collection. Talking about segregation of duty is good to keep in mind. If the CISO head of cyber is the only source of truth, you have a critical dependency or a single point of failure. And then, of course, to the point he makes later, there's no ability. You have to only trust. You can't verify because there's only a single source of truth. So I think it's not just helpful to have internal audit. I think it's almost mandatory, I would say.
Well, it's helpful, but isn't this the whole point? I mean, I was listening to what Deborah was saying. If we are worried that our own internal audit part of the family don't understand us, then what is the use of having them? We might as well just wait for the external audit.
Yes, yes, very true.
So we have not engaged. We have not created an audit function, a good audit function, if it doesn't understand what we're trying to achieve. And,
when you say we, is it we as the security organisation or we as the organisation as a whole?
We as the organisation. And
right,
then the internal audit,
because it's often out of our control, right?
Absolutely. And then the internal audit then become the interface between us and the external audit, whether that's kind of voluntary because we want 27001 or whatever, or it's mandatory through some sort of regulation. I mean, I actually used to use sometimes back at NCC days, used to use the external auditors sometimes to steer them towards some of the difficult people, and that was a good use.
Was that to waste the audit, to run down the clock as they talk to the difficult people?
Yeah, there was a bit of that, but there was also people who you'd hope to be on holiday, of course, during the day when the external auditors came in.
Or you're told to work from home. Yeah, I know. We've all played that game.
My worst experience, and I'm sure a little judicious looking on LinkedIn, a little open source intelligence will work out who I'm talking about, was having got through an LRQA audit to 27001, and we did really, really well. We'd worked very hard. We got everything shipshape in Bristol fashion. Proudly took the assessor round to see the chief exec, and the chief exec picks up the assessor's report and says, right, I says, well, this is great, puts it to one side and said, well, now let me tell you what really goes on here.
This is not how it works. Just because you've got it doesn't mean you can't change it.
Absolutely terrifying. There's another time I was actually called in to mediate between myself and the guy who'd taken over the CISO security management role, where the auditor was very unhappy because they looked at the risk assessment and said, this is a poor risk treatment plan because you've still got red risks on it. And I pointed out that these were things which couldn't be mitigated down to green. We couldn't change. We couldn't change them. And
red is not necessarily bad.
I wanted our board to be aware that these were problems that they needed to actually keep an eye on. We had a little bit of an argument. He eventually agreed to accept it because it was red, amber, green. And when I said, well, the only way to solve this would to introduce a flashing amber level, he decided to give in.
That's right. Yeah. Proceed with caution. That's exactly it. Okay, we've got our first question from, surprise, surprise, Alan Jenkins. It's how does the business gain most value from having a good internal audit capability as opposed to an annual one-off spend on an external auditor? It kind of answered that to a certain extent, but I think, Deborah, let's go to you.
Yeah, so great question, and I think
it's not bad. Let's not pump his ego.
All right,
too much.
Okay. It's not mug number 3 for Alan Jenkins' question then. Okay, sorry, Alan, tried. I think the nub of this is we've touched on a little bit, and it's about the internal auditor's understanding of two things. One, the organisational context, which you would hope they've got a really good grasp on, and two, their understanding of what we're trying to achieve with our cybersecurity controls. If they've got both of those in place, then that what they're looking at are those things which are important to us as a business. What an external auditor is looking at is what the regulator tells them they've got to look at, or what the standard is you're trying to meet. So it's a set checklist that's designed by an external body. And that external body is looking for those standard questions across the industry, as we talked about earlier. What your internal audit team are doing are hopefully working at a checklist that is designed for your organization.
Yeah.
So it should be more meaningful and should reflect the priorities of your own board rather than somebody else on the outside. So that, I guess, is the where they add the true value, in that they're saying, well, our chairman says this, or our execs say that, or our board of directors are particularly concerned this year about growth. How is it that cybersecurity is contributing towards growth and not holding us back? What are the key controls that are helping with that? For example, ought to be the level of discussion we're having with them. Now, you're never going to have that with one of the big 5 external auditors, because that's not their bag.
No, sold by partners, delivered by interns. I'm very broad stroking that. Don't get me wrong. For all of you big 5 listeners out, or viewers out there, but yeah, it's true. There is that critical understanding that effectively means you're getting the value of an external audit plus the value of an audit by someone who really knows what the areas of pain are, to a certain extent, where the skeletons are hidden, and also what as you say, what the priorities of the business are. So ostensibly, it's probably going to be more thorough than just than a regular external audit, right?
I think. Sorry, I was just going to jump in, because I think one of the potential areas, one of the sticking points, is that we are talking about a kind of separate audit function. And if not all of it, is a secondary role for people. So you're actually deploying people who know about the business to go and do audits, and then you've got I've actually done this. This is what we used to do at NCC when it was a very big organisation. We had offices all over the UK. And we got some great cross-fertilization by people spending some of their time on an audit, which also educated them in other areas of the business. But it also kind of created this kind of internal network of security champions who didn't just kind of appear out of nowhere like a large drink spill once a year and to do the audit.
I really like that idea, because I've always come across internal audit as a separate function, and maybe that's to do with the scale of organizations I've worked at, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you're absolutely right. I think actually having maybe a core audit team, but then with a crew of secondary auditors, for want of a better term, second job auditors, as you say, really does sort of cross-pollinate that kind of that learning and that spreading of information and good practice across the board. I really like that concept. I'd not considered that before. Veselin, is that something that you've seen operate effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all cases, right? So it could be internal audit performed by external, right? And it could be much better than the internal auditor would do for various reasons. I mentioned the resources constraints that are always there, or maybe the partner we're engaging with might not be the big 4, right? So they might be really following some very specific methodology. So if we, if the compliance team or security team, whoever is engaging with them on the internal audit, works with these external partners, establishes, the framework of the audit plan, they agree on all the methodology, how it's going to happen, and they provide with sufficient budget to do so, access to premises if required. I've seen very good reports. Very good reports that end up in continuation of hiring the same company to provide the same type of services, because they do a pretty good job, better than some other companies. And I've seen this, they do this, we provide them with a specific framework. That's not one of these generic ones that you see like ISO 27001 and say, this is our framework, this is our selection of controls, this is how it looks in our environment. Can you audit against this and this methodology? And I've seen some of them do a good job.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a good comment in it from John Acornley. I'm just glad it's someone different now. Which it says, in my experience, the board of directors through the Audit and Risk Committee determine the work plan of internal audit. It seems to me that the cybersecurity expertise on the board should ensure that the internal auditors have the relevant knowledge to perform a cybersecurity audit as defined by the A&R committee. And I think this really resonates with what you just said, Veselin, and with what Daniel just said as well. So I think when we've talked about, you know, the internal audit function needing to understand the environment we're working in. The point here is about using language that everyone can understand to communicate cyber risk. Now, this is probably particularly relevant when you have a less cybersecurity skilled or aware internal audit group. But the use of language and how you harmonize what and how you communicate what your concerns are is really important here, I think, isn't it? I think it's a case of, if we use the right language, it's going to resonate much more with those in positions of authority.
Not just positions of authority. I mean, we need this, throughout the organisation. I mean, I find myself, having to think about what I say. I'll drop a name here. I don't know whether anyone's come across Dame Pauline Neville-Jones. She used to be a security minister, and now she still is very active in the security community. And I remember once bouncing up to her with, whatever great idea I'd had that day, went off on one, and she just stared up at me and looked at me and just said, "What exactly does that mean?"
Yeah.
And I thought, she's absolutely right. So I now, if I'm going to talk to somebody, I now apply the Pauline Neville-Jones test. Like, what exactly does that mean? Is somebody going to say that to me?
Yeah.
And of course, the danger is we're in these communities. And hence this goes together with my idea of having the kind of the part-time internal audit. It is difficult in the regulatory stuff because, of course, the regulatory stuff. A wonderful chap called Roy Whittington used to come and talk to my students every year when he was working at Barclays. Used to work. He was an architect, system architect there, and he always used to say, "What's the most important thing in banking?" And everyone's going, "Oh, money, money, money." And he goes, "No, it's regulation, because unless they comply with the regulation, they can't move."
Yeah.
So, of course, that is actually the danger with any kind of audit, is that actually, yes, kind of, proper innovation and applied within the organization is stifled because of the fear of directors going to jail, and that's going to drive stuff forever.
Yeah. The so what question, I think, is really important, which
yes.
Which Alan has just popped in there. Blimey, Alan's on fire today. So, Deborah, communication, I know, is something that's key in your area as a CISO, head of security, and being able to translate to the board. And I think we often, speak the language of the business and all of those sort of stereotypical phrases. But it is important, isn't it?
It's critical, actually. So the language of business talks is usually money. It's usually opportunity. We talk the opposite language of that. We talk we don't even talk about investment. We talk about cost. We definitely talk about risk instead of opportunity. And we love our TLAs. In fact, we've already used some on here. We've used MFA a number of times. You use TLS. We talk in TLAs all the time. And of course, the board have their own TLAs. They're not the same ones we use. So we need to kind of get a bit smarter about understanding the language and the conversation that goes on at board level, which is not the same language that goes on at senior management level, because I think we need to remember that the two are different. And I actually agree entirely with Alan's comment in the chat, which is the so what question. You need to go and have that conversation having answered the so what question. So if you want to highlight, I think Daniel talks about a red risk on his risk register. If you want to highlight a red risk, up there at senior level. There's no point going in and saying, we've got this risk and, you know, you all need to be scared of it or do something about it. It's got to be kind of formulated as, well, we've got this risk and it is because of X, Y, Z, whatever that might be. And most importantly, if it materializes, this is the level of pain we're going to feel, or the amount of money it's going to cost us, or how many person days it's going to take us to dig ourselves out of a big hole, what it's going to do to our reputation. So we need to be able to have those conversations in real plain, you know, language, just talking as if we're talking to other senior leaders. And we do this actually all the time when we have our one-on-ones with our peer group, when we have those corridor chats, you know, but there's something about getting in a room with a presentation and the opportunity to give death by PowerPoint that turns security people into speakers
the dullest people in the world.
Yeah, speaking a load of old bobbins, to be honest. And
at the risk of, you know, we need to reframe the way we talk about risk, etc. And at the risk of using another TLA, it's the ROI. Sorry, it's the ROI to the board. The risk of incarceration, as I like to call it. It's you know, here's the risk that's actually going to happen to the business. Not we just don't have a backup. It's we don't have a backup, and therefore this will happen, and that will happen, and that will happen, and one of you is going to be fitted for an orange jumpsuit. You know, that's the kind of, you know, obviously extreme, but it's those kind of.
But is it, Tom? I'm going to disagree with you there, because I think we've. Sorry to disagree.
No, it's good. It's what we want.
We've peddled this FUD, another one, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We have peddled it for so long. You'll go to prison. You'll get fined 4% of your global turnover. Actually, how many organisations has that happened to? Yes, a few, and a few, very, very few. Count them on one hand. Businesses have gone under because of a cyber event. There were a couple last year, but on the whole, businesses move on from it. So let's take our friends teissTalk. When that teissTalk breach happened a decade or so ago, that was a huge, huge cybersecurity breach. Everybody was talking about it. It cost a certain person their job, not for long. You know, that person has gone on to do great things and receive huge paychecks. teissTalk has carried on doing business, and people have bought services from teissTalk. So actually, is that what's going to happen? That's probably not. And so when I talk to the board, I'll say, you know, in the extreme, yes, but realistically, what is going to happen? It is going to cause us a shed load of work and unpicking, and fingers will be pointing and questions will be asked. And look no further than the topic of the year so far, which is that ITV program in 4 parts about certain IT system and certain companies, and the consequences for them, which may or may not have actually finished yet. You know, if we want to talk about the real consequences to a board, when do they feel that pain?
Yeah, it's the human suffering, actually, that is normally, whether that's on your employees who are trying to fix the mess, or the general public for whatever reason, or in this case, the post people, the post office folks. You know, you're absolutely right.
But on a technical level as well, this is, I mean, this is bringing out. I mean, what are many security problems? It's because of defective software, and this is now manifested. I must say, I do have every admiration for teissTalk, because it has done wonders for my TV career over the years.
Ulterior motives, I say. Look, we've literally got a couple of minutes of talking left, and I want to pick this up because, curse you, Alan Jenkins, you made a really lovely point here and question I want to bring up, which is, you know, expanding on John's point, is there a role for a cyber Ned who sits on the Audit and Risk Committee to provide SME oversight of the business organisation's cyber capability? Love this as a question. Love this as an idea. Has anybody seen this actually happen anywhere? Because if not, there's at least 4 people on here who are probably looking for cyber Ned positions.
I am actually a cyber Ned.
Ooh.
Yeah, so outside of my day job, because obviously you can't be a non-exec where your day job is. So outside of my day job, I am a board member and provide cyber expertise and oversight. So yeah.
Do you have influence? And don't answer this if it's for professional reasons if you don't wish to. But do you have influence over the audit and risk side of things, or is it?
So
I
sit on the audit and risk committee as well.
There you go.
So, and I think it's really effective. And I spend, of all the people in the business, I think the IT CIO or equivalent IT director is one of the key people that I spend time with, helping to formulate that cyber strategy, etc. I think it is something that boards need to be looking at moving forward.
Yeah. Excellent. Good point, Alan. And well, at least one of us is involved there. Let's draw this to a close. We're coming to a close, so I'll give each of you a chance for some closing comments. I'm going to give you, let's be generous and say 20 seconds each. For our audience, what's the one thing they should be doing when they get back to their desk tomorrow? Let's think practical, in practical terms, on this subject. What's the one thing they can do? So, Deborah, let's start with you.
Pick up the phone to your head of internal audit, your internal auditor, whatever, and just say, can we have a coffee? Can I just help you with any issues that you might have understanding cyber, how best to audit cyber, and can we plan how we're going to go about that for the next year?
Brilliant. Veselin.
Oh, I was thinking more, what is necessary for, for talking to these people all around. I would say everything I do is trying to understand the target audience, the target group. And oftentimes the issue lies in the terminology we use. So I would say as soon as you have some kind of engagement, it could be internal audit engagement, whatever, make sure you understand what kind of terminology they use. Because nowadays, like in my aviation industry, they start using a little bit different terminology than we usually used to. So a deficiency might mean non-conformity in certain risk contexts. A threat might be defined with a completely different term. So I would say as soon as you have to engage with somebody with internal audit, just check what kind of terminology they use so you can talk their language, you understand what they're saying.
Nice, like it. And finally, Daniel.
Okay, let's go full circle back to those resolutions and the incident response plan. Of course it's not if, it's when there is an incident, can I engage internal audit to make sure that we not only recover from the incident, but we end up in a better place to be able to cope with things in future? So we don't just spend our time making sure that we get back to where we are. We used to talk about disaster recovery, and we never recover. We're a different organization once we've actually been through it. So can internal audit help us take through that journey so we end up in a better place rather than trying to deal with it and then call them in separately to make sure that we're still compliant with whatever changes we've made? Take it as an opportunity for improvement and to work with that other part of the business.
So get that incident response capability spun up as soon as possible.
Capability and coping. Coping is my favorite word at the moment.
Coping, because that's pretty much all we're doing in January. Excellent. Thank you so much, the three of you. Really appreciate that. It falls to me to award a mug, and it also not just does it fall to me, but it pains me to say that, of course, it has to go to Alan Jenkins. I've never seen anybody try so hard to get a mug during one of these sessions. So, Alan, well done. Thank you. You did say you were going to get involved on LinkedIn earlier. So thank you very much for your questions, comments, thoughts, etc., Alan. And if you'd like to deprive Alan of his 4th mug next time, please do make sure to get involved and ask some questions accordingly. We will be back in, what is it, 2 weeks' time, I think it is. Let's see. Yes, on the 25th of January, where we're going to be talking about, is your cybersecurity approach leaving neurodiverse colleagues behind? Normally a very, very popular subject and a good, robust conversation there. Once again, I want to say thank you to Daniel, Deborah and Veselin. Thank you very much. And to our audience, stay secure, my friends.